Good morning or good afternoon, whenever you're listening to this. My name is Kevin Hewitson, and joined today with me is Sue Hayton, our volunteer patient transport coordinator, and Shaun Carpenter, who is the volunteer coordinator for the volunteer passport scheme. Together, we work to recruit drivers for our volunteer patient transport scheme. And today we're going to be talking about the benefits and the challenges of becoming a volunteer. So if I can just start with explaining a little bit about the volunteer patient transport scheme. Denton surgery is a rural surgery based in Northampton. We are served by 15 villages over a 35 square mile area. So quite a rural area with not the best of transport links. To help solve the problem of patients getting to appointments on time and relieving some of their anxiety, we set up a volunteer patient transport scheme. This uses volunteer drivers and their own vehicles to pick patients up from the various villages and take them to appointments at hospitals or the surgery or wherever they need to be.
Opticians, dentists.
The list is growing as Sue's finding, Sue being our coordinator. Once we've set up, we realized obviously that the service is very popular, and as a result, we're looking to recruit more drivers. Recruitment can be for minutes, almost, one appointment every now and then, or maybe a more regular. It is totally up to the volunteers. However, they are critical in many organizations, aren't they, Shaun? Volunteers are sort of like the oil that keeps the mechanism working sometimes. So
Absolutely.
First of all, welcome to Shaun anyway. Would you like to fill in any aspects of your role? I know it's been very brief, volunteer coordinator, but we'll start with that if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. So my name's Shaun, and I help to run a program that's been organised by General Practice Alliance, which is called the Volunteer Passport. And Volunteer Passport has been set up to help people volunteer across the Northamptonshire county, and to create one volunteer profile that can follow you around so that you can volunteer for different organizations without having to continue to create different profiles. And we reach out to various organizations around Northamptonshire, such as yourself, and try and bring everyone together that's interested in volunteering in one place. It's like a one-stop shop of you can advertise your positions and you can sign up as a volunteer for those positions as well. And we were set up and funded initially by NHS England, due to helping people with their mental well-being, as it's proven how volunteering can really help people to get out and about and improve their mental well-being. So that was the main premise of why we've been set up. And the scheme continues to go from strength to strength. We have over 600 registered volunteers now, and we continue to keep growing week by week.
Fantastic. So let's look at some of the issues of recruiting volunteers then. I know it's a challenge we face when we're looking at initiating any new community program, as it were, is getting people together. So what do you see as the challenges in recruiting volunteers? And if there's any particular ones that you've come across that are more frequent?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when COVID happened, a lot of people went into isolation, and people that used to volunteer obviously stopped doing that. And after COVID ended, sadly, we didn't see many volunteer numbers returning after COVID. A lot of people helped out during that COVID time. And then when it came back to getting back out and about again, we saw a real dip in volunteer numbers. And it's been very hard to get those numbers back up again. And we've asked people what the reasons are for not volunteering. And the things that come up time and time again are lack of time and lack of money. They seem to be the main reasons why people have barriers to volunteering. But what we're trying to do is organizations are trying to find ways that we can remove those barriers from people. So for things like money, some organizations now will offer reimbursements for out-of-pocket expenses. And for time, some organizations such as yourself, how we open that, are trying to be more flexible with what we expect from a volunteer. So some volunteers are required week by week and expected to give a minimum commitment, whereas some are happy to just give an hour here and there where they can spare that. So it's trying to find ways around those limitations that we can say to people, if you have a couple of hours to watch TV, how can we try and convince you to spend those couple of hours giving back to your community? And that's the message we're all trying to share at the moment.
Yeah, I think one of the things people often think is that to be a volunteer, you have to have, reached the end of your normal working career, as it were. But that's not the case, is it?
Absolutely not. So for my job as a volunteer coordinator, there are a lot of skills that were missing from my resume before I got to this position. And I found a lot of those skills through volunteering. I went and did social media management for various organizations that were local to me, did some computer work for organizations that were local to me. And that helped me to build up my resume, my CV, and actually help me get the job I have today. So I think that, as you say, it's obviously when you're retired, you're blessed with more time. Usually that's the case, but not always. And certainly for younger people as well, it's about prioritizing time, isn't it? It's like, what are your interests? What are your passions? What are you spending your time on? And it's how can we fit volunteering and how can we let people know that volunteering is a great way to use that free time?
Yeah. One of the things that we face, because we work with patients, is that they come under the classification of vulnerable. Yeah, so vulnerable adults or vulnerable young people. So one of the requirements on us is that any volunteers have a DBS check. Now, is that something you could just explain to people what a DBS check is, what it involves for them, and if there's any costs involved, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. So a DBS check is a process where there's a department within the government that checks all the data that you provide about proving who you are. So you will have to submit some ID, a list of past names and previous addresses, and they'll run that information against their records to make sure that if you're volunteering, if someone you're spending your time with is vulnerable, that you haven't got anything that you haven't already disclosed to the person you're volunteering with. So they'll run a nice in-depth check. Sometimes that can take a couple of days. Sometimes that can take a little bit longer, as we know, depending on when there's sometimes a hiccup in the system when they can't find us. But sooner or later, we do get there in the end, which is great. Volunteers actually don't have to pay for their DBS checks if they are enhanced. But you can't just go up to a DBS office and ask for one. So you have to do it via an organization. So what we do at Volunteer Passport is we offer all our volunteers an enhanced DBS check for free. So we actually have funding in place to do that as an organization. And the only crux is that you have to have a position that warrants that. So as you said, because some of your volunteers would come into contact with more vulnerable people, we need to make sure that everyone is safe and they are who they say they are. So obviously we run those for that organization. But there are some positions that don't require it. There are some positions where you don't come into contact with vulnerable people and you don't have to wait for the DBS to come through. You can just jump straight in and away you go.
Yeah. So if somebody mentions DBS checking, it's not something that people should worry about. It's just a process which protects both sides, I suppose, both the volunteer, because they know that they're okay in terms of that organization, and the organization recognizes them as being safe as well in terms of the people that they are serving.
Absolutely, that's right. We want to make sure that all our vulnerable people are well protected, and as you say, that volunteers are who they say they are. It's always good to have these checks in place.
Is there any particular age group that you think we could target to volunteer? I mean, at the moment, most of our volunteers are the retired type, aren't they? And we're always looking to think, well, if this service is going to continue, and it's shown that it really does need to, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we are being faced with more and more challenges in terms of a number of appointments and what have you. So we are keen to try and sort of recruit a broader range of people, in terms of age. But it's, is there any particular group that you think we might be able to sort of don't normally come forward, or you think they might have some skill sets that we could tap into?
Yeah, absolutely. There's always going to be people out there that are looking to get involved and find a way, and it's trying to spread that word of mouth, isn't it? It's trying to get your cause out there as to why people should. I think we're able to compile a lot of data about our volunteers, and most of them head towards the 45 to 54 age range, actually. So it's trying to find the volunteers, perhaps in that age bracket, that are looking to get involved in their community, but perhaps can't spare too much time, but still have that drive and desire to get involved and to take part. As you said, people who are retired sometimes have a bit extra time on their hands. Sometimes people just starting out in their careers might be looking for skills or to get involved in their community. So I would say there's no real pocket of volunteers that are easier to recruit than the other. I think it's all just about promoting the cause and letting people know what you do and why they should get involved.
Right. Are there any, you mentioned about collecting data on your volunteers. Are there any volunteering activities that are more popular than others?
Volunteering activities, it really depends. So I know we've had some from Northampton Town Football Club. They prove very popular with our younger volunteers, definitely, like match day helpers. And we have some slightly more specialized ones as well. So we've had some from Northamptonshire, a firefighting team, which is very interesting as well. So I think the more, I don't want to use the word obscure, but the more that your position stands out, I think the more people seem to resonate with that. So we have a big need for befrienders in the county. So we have a lot of advertisements for befrienders in the county. So it's finding a way that how can you make your position stand out? What can you offer your volunteers, and whether that's training, guidance through the way, it's just trying to highlight that and making sure that we can show people why they should be giving time with your organization.
Yeah.
I was just going to say about training, because I know with a couple of volunteers, when I've mentioned about maybe doing some training of some description, everybody's eyes have rolled. You know, they don't mind giving up the time to do the driving, but they don't really want to feel as though they need to go for specialist training.
Absolutely, and training can be a sticking point for some people. Like when we first launched the passport scheme a few years ago, we used to make training mandatory before we would allow people onto the platform, and we found that to be a huge barrier. As you said, people were reluctant to take training that maybe would be useful but not necessarily relevant for what they were doing in that position. And we always say training is you know, by the service provider themselves. What is it that you need your volunteers to know? We have a great partnership with NHS England where we offer online training modules for free to our volunteers, where some organizations insist that you complete certain modules, some just point you to it and ask if you're interested in it, please do. So it really depends on a service provider and what their requirements are. But yeah, I agree. Anything that we don't need, any barriers that are in place that if we actually think about it, we don't need to be in place, we should definitely remove, because as you say, it's easy to find roadblocks when you least expect them with things like training.
Can I just take you back to the befriending bit and bring Sue in here? Because one of the things we found very early on was when we picked patients up and we took them to their appointment, fine, they got out of the car and went for their appointment. When we took them home, we'd be sitting there talking to them for 20 minutes, you know, and sort of not quite willing them out of the car, but we had other things to do, you know, and it's that sort of befriending thing. And then Sue's picked that up, haven't you, Sue? And do you want to tell them what we did, what else? This is almost an additional benefit to a volunteer driver.
Well, as a realization that people were actually quite lonely and isolated, I approached our social prescriber that is attached to the doctors and suggested we started doing a coffee morning, which we do now every other week, and it is proving very popular. So again, I'm having to rely on the drivers and we do this free of charge. So I'm asking the drivers to do an extra thing, is go and pick people up to bring them to the coffee morning and also take them home again. And actually most of the drivers that are involved with that have been great, and they've stayed and they've chatted, but there's always more that we can do. I've also taken them on a day trip. You know, we've got in the next couple of weeks, we're taking them for an afternoon tea at a local place in Northampton that is run by
St Andrews. It's the work
Yes,
bridge.
it's the work bridge.
Oh, Workbridge. Yes, yes, yes.
But they've got a cafe down there now, and there's a garden centre and one thing and another. So that's been really popular. And we're doing that on a Sunday because, again, what I've found is an awful lot of the people are very, very lonely at the weekend.
That's fantastic news about the scheme, Sue. Really, really happy to hear that you've spotted that and built on that, and that is amazing. But yes, as you say, weekends can be, I can imagine, especially lonely if you are isolated and you do struggle to get out. And how lovely that your volunteers have risen to the occasion. And as you say, if you're volunteer inclined as a person, and you can see that once you see that difference you're making, once you see that you're helping someone live a better life, it's not easy, but it certainly makes an easier case to say, can we get involved with these people? Once you form that human connection, isn't it? It's getting people through the door and showing them. And it's like, our message is always volunteering feels good, and it's hard to get past. I don't have the time, I don't have the money, I don't have this and that and the other. But once you do it, once you volunteer, once you see how you're changing people's lives by just giving your free time, it changes you incredibly. And that's great to hear that you're taking that and using that momentum and offering this additional service. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, certainly for me, it's given me a bit more of a purpose than I had, because I had to take early retirement through ill health. And I wasn't quite ready to retire. But it gave me something to focus on other than just myself.
Absolutely. That sense of purpose is so important. And we don't really realize it sometimes when we're stuck in our jobs. We're like, oh, off to work again. But you see it in, you know, my parents are retired, and you see that my mum definitely volunteers with a local organization, and I can see the difference. It gets her out, it gets her engaging with people, it gets her back in the community. And it's, as you say, it gives you that sense of purpose that perhaps you didn't realize might not always be there in retirement. We look so forward to stopping and putting our feet up, and then it's like, not everyone is blessed to have the funds to travel the world in their retirement, and it's like, I certainly don't have a plan in place for that. So it's like, you're going to need to use that time for something, and what better way than to not only help others, but there is a sense, a guilty pleasure of feeling good in yourself when you help people, and that's perfectly okay. And I think that's an incredible thing.
I think that one of the things, just listening to that and reflecting on the well-being meetings we have, the coffee mornings, that might be a really good place to invite volunteers, potential volunteers along to actually come along for that coffee morning, or one of the other events that we do, so that they can get to see the benefits. Because as you say, Shaun, it's very difficult to put it into words. I have a list here from the Royal Voluntary Service of the things that people get as a result of volunteering, and it's a list, but it doesn't actually touch here, does it? It doesn't actually touch that.
You can't put it into words how it changes you. And there's trying to think what the word is now. It's almost like a chemical release in your brain.
Endorphins.
Absolutely, and that is equal to the same level of pleasure and rush as if you were to, let's say, take part in a tombola and you pulled a ticket of a 0 or a 5. That little yes, that little win, that little excitement, that is the same chemical that is released when you volunteer. It's proven, and that is why giving back does feel good. But you don't have to spend £1 for 2 tickets. You can actually go back and save your money and still get that excitement, still get that rush. And I think that's incredibly hard to explain to someone, as you say, that what you're going to get out is that true sense of worth in yourself for helping others, and giving back feels good. But yes, it's convincing people to give it a try and see for themselves, right?
I'll read through the list. I think we've covered most of them, but I'll read through
please do,
the list. New skills and valuable work experience. You mentioned that early on yourself, didn't you, with your
Sure did,
developing your CV. Making new friends. I think that's certainly one which I would have actually sort of trumpeted. Better physical and mental health and well-being, and that touches on that endorphins and feeling good about yourself and getting out and about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Giving something back. You know,
Yeah.
it's that pay forward sometimes as well, not just giving it back, but paying it forward. I mean, somebody who's 45 and volunteers to be a driver may just need a volunteer driver in their 70s. You never know.
Absolutely. And I'd say to it that, you know, what would it mean to you knowing if your elderly relatives couldn't get to an appointment and some stranger you've never met is able to take them on your behalf? How incredibly generous of that person, and you know, what an incredible reason to give back yourself, to know that there's someone to help people you care about, and maybe you can do the same for someone else, right?
Good point. Improving your confidence is one. A sense of connection to others in the community. And I think we've seen, you know, unfortunately, we're not in the best of times if you listen to the media at the moment with the discontent. But the one
Absolutely.
thing
But
that's
did you, have
coming
you,
through,
sorry, Kev, I'll just stop you there for a second. Did you see in the news about how communities came together though?
yes, that
In
was
the
the
news?
point.
Now that
Yeah.
is a story I'm interested in.
Yeah, that was the point.
Communities
Yeah,
coming together for a greater good. Isn't really that what volunteering is in a nutshell?
Yeah.
Being shown on our streets when I wake up this morning in the news, to see communities come together to say, this is where we live. We have pride in where we are.
Yeah.
Everyone here matters. And isn't that volunteering and,
Yes.
and what people are doing now? It's
Absolutely.
incredible.
That was the point I was about to make, because the sense of connection to others in the community. No, I mean, that came about very much through COVID, I think, as well. When we would, as a patient group, we were delivering prescriptions and collecting prescriptions, and, you know, actually going out, knocking on windows and saying, are you okay in there? You know, we haven't heard from you for a while. Another thing, improve how things work for the better. So I know with us, the transport scheme, I mean, it hasn't it? The anxiety it's reduced in people.
Absolutely.
It's even making a difference in the hospital, because car parking in Northampton Hospital is not good. You know, trying to find somewhere.
Yeah.
And so people are beginning now, they can drive, but they would prefer to relieve themselves of the anxiety and stress
Of trying to find a parking space.
Yeah, and get to the appointment on
It's
time.
the last thing you want to be worried about when you're on your way to a hospital appointment is, where am I going to plonk my car, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's one less thing to be on your mind on a stressful day as it is. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And it shows a level of commitment as well, I think, you know, something that you are doing for others. Yeah. And it, as you say, lots of benefits. So just a summary there, Shaun, is anything that we think we might have missed in terms of either the volunteer passport? And I think the thing that you said at the very beginning, one, register with one organization and be able to volunteer for others. You might not set out to do that, but you know, when you see the opportunities that come along or are there, you may find that you do. And your organization, I think the volunteer passport, it was a brilliant concept when I started looking into how we were going to get our volunteers and how we're going to get the DBS checks, etc. I actually thought it was a very, very good idea.
Absolutely. Trying to spread word of mouth for volunteer positions is tricky. Social media only has so much outreach. We use it, but it only has so much outreach. Word of mouth is obviously good too, if you have a good connection base to start off with. So what better way to advertise your positions to volunteers than to put them on a platform where volunteers are ready to give their time, wherever in the county it is. And it's seeing the bigger picture, that it's not that volunteers will leave your organization to go somewhere else. It's that they will add that to what they're already doing, that they will find more interest, more passions, that once they start volunteering, it's showing them that how good it can be, and to keep repeating that volunteering, to keep that commitment, as you said, and to feel that difference you're making. And what better way to do that than to continue to support charities and organizations you like, which is why we're always trying to look for new positions and always looking for new organizations, just to make our breadth of volunteer opportunities as big and as possible, so that anyone that wants to get involved can find a way to get involved in their community.
Yeah, right. To contact you, Shaun, I've got it down as go to the web page for the volunteer passport. So Google volunteer passport Northampton. Find the volunteer passport. Then there's the contact us button, and that will get through to you. So if anybody's thinking of exploring the volunteer passport and looking for opportunities, that's the best way, is it, to get there.
Absolutely. If you're an organization looking to get involved, you can email us, go to, as you said, volunteerpassport.co.uk. You're able to send us a direct message from the get in touch button at the top, or there's a contact button at the bottom. If you're interested in volunteering, if you want to sign up, you can go ahead at volunteerpassport.co.uk. You don't need to drop us a message. Just go ahead, create your user profile, fill in your details, and start looking for volunteer opportunities straight away. And I should add that all of this service is funded by General Practice Alliance, by NHS England. There's no cost passed on to anyone in this scheme, whether you're a service provider or a volunteer. The platform is completely free to use throughout the entire journey. So what harm is it to create your own volunteer passport, sign up and be ready to go as soon as, even if there's not an opportunity you're interested in at the moment, sign up, be ready to go for when there is, and you can start your volunteer journey.
Brilliant, thank you. And if you'd like to find out more about the Denton Surgery Patient Group's volunteer patient transport scheme, what a mouthful, then you can leave your name and contact details at the surgery on your next visit. You can email Sue, our coordinator, and her email address is coordinator@dspg.me. Or you can ring Sue. You've got a mobile number for the coordinator, which is 07506, if I've got it right, 866 298. And finally, you can email the secretary at the Denton Surgery Patient Group, which is myself, and the email for that is secretary@DSPG. We'll put all that information in here somehow. I think we can edit in. We can probably get numbers flashing up at the bottom of the screen or something. I don't know. We'll see. I'm on that learning journey as well as far as social media is concerned. Okay. So thank you today for your input today, Shaun, and to hearing about the Volunteer Patient Transport Scheme. And thank you very much for the support that you've given us as a scheme as well in getting ourselves up and running and continuing to recruit volunteers. So thank you for listening today, and look out for any other podcasts covering the work of Denton Surgery Patient Group. We've already got one up there on how the dispensary works and the benefits to the surgery or the dispensary. Bye for now.